Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV WORLD. In today's show, we will be talking about two very important stories, both of which is with regards to what is going on in India. We of course also know that this is something that has been happening for a long time within India and something that we have seen happening in the past as well, with regards to the way that the minorities in India are being treated and the way that, of course, Muslims are being treated within India. We have seen that in the past also certain comments have come in, not only from the larger public, but of course also from the political leaders. And that, of course, has been unfortunate. The issue of Islamophobia is one that the people of Pakistan and Muslims all around the world have raised and, of course, talked about, particularly how it has even further deteriorated within India. We, of course, know that recently, in the past 3 months, there were controversial remarks made against the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, by a BJP spokeswoman who was then suspended after there was global outrage. And now we have seen that similar incident has occurred once again, where Thakur Raja Singh has also made comments which have been against the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and of course have hurt the sentiments of the Muslim population all over the world. Pakistan's Foreign Office in a statement has of course condemned this and has strongly registered their protest against what is happening within India and have demanded the Indian government to take action, and not take action in terms of what has happened in the past. We have seen that even though the BJP spokeswoman was suspended, there has been a full state protection also given to the former BJP leader. We have seen that in the case of Raja Singh, he was detained earlier, but he has been granted a bail by a local court, so he was released merely hours after his arrest. So of course this is something that shows the way that this particular issue is being dealt, the kind of importance it's being given, and the way that India and the BJP leadership continues to treat Muslims and continues to treat people who are making these controversial remarks, who are talking against the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, hurting the sentiments of the Muslim world. And despite all of this, there seems to be an impunity that is being enjoyed by these leaders, and the way that they're acting and behaving seems as if it's not much consequence that such remarks are being made. Of course, in the previous incident, we had seen global outrage and action in terms of talk about boycotting Indian goods as well, which perhaps might have been the cause of the suspension of the BJP spokeswoman. But then again, this is something that's happening again, has happened many times in the past as well. So what really needs to be done about it? What are we seeing in terms of the development of Islamophobia within India, and how the international community must respond? Our second segment is also with reference to what is going on in India. We have seen, of course, in previous times as well, there have been many investigative reports that have come out seriously documenting evidence and facts against the kind of issues that the people of Kashmir have been facing, and the way that the Indian occupied territory is being used, is being changed, and is being altered for the benefit of the occupation forces, and of course the increase of suffering of the people of Kashmir. Now this particular briefing report has also come out, which is focused on the silencing of journalists and human rights activists and their voices who stand up and talk about what is happening within the Indian illegally occupied territory, and of course point out with facts and evidence what is going on within Kashmir. Something of course that is being shunned, that is very rare, and something that is now of course very less frequent in terms of the way that it is being handled and dealt with by the Indian occupation forces. So we'll talk about that in particular with reference to the way that these voices are being silenced and how that is going to and is already contributing negatively towards the cause of the people of Kashmir, and of course allowing the Indian occupation forces to continue with their human rights abuses and violations within the territory. So that's going to be our focus in the second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, I've been joined in the studio by Farrukh Pitafi, and for our first segment with regards to the remarks against the Holy Prophet and the kind of action the BJP has taken, I've been joined by Dr. Jameel Khan, who's a former ambassador, and also Dr. John Dayal, who's an Indian human rights activist. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us and being a part of the debate. I'll start with you, Dr. Jameel. Of course, we have seen that there has been condemnation from the Pakistan side. Of course, the Foreign Office has also given its statement in this regard, and we have always, of course, condemned such incidents, talked about how this needs to stop, called on to the international community to respond. We have highlighted this to the Indian authorities as well and have told them that they need to take strict action against such incidents. However, this also has, for some reason, become some sort of a repeat telecast as well, because it keeps happening again and again, and we keep responding in similar fashion. However, at the end of the day, the incidents don't stop. There is no exemplary punishment given. There is no means to create some sort of deterrent of this not happening again in the future. So while, of course, these statements and condemnations are welcome, not only from Pakistan, but from other countries as well that must respond and condemn these incidents, what exactly do you think this is going to count for, and how exactly can we enable some sort of action being taken against such people?
Right. First of all, the history, as you have also mentioned in your intro, that it is just continuing. It's continuing unabated, right? And it appears to most of people like myself around the world that it is orchestrated. It is the part of the strategy of BJP government. Otherwise, and it is with a full planning. Um, some of the eyewaches arresting Raja Singh, releasing after a few hours under the garb of the court orders. Well, it depends what kind of a prosecution and what kind of a case was prepared, what clauses were made. The minorities, if they commit this kind of an offense, and they are there for years and years, and not even they are bailed, they are released. So if we just have these two or three indications, and if we correlate it with the international law and their own Indian law. Now, in international law, one of the document which we have, one of the international customary law is Universal Declaration, which gives the protection to the religious right, human right, and it's very clearly illustrated in Article 18 of the Universal Declaration. In 1966, International Covenant for the Civil and Political and Religious Right. 1981, it was Declaration for Elimination of Intolerance and Discrimination of Religious Belief. So, and then there are so many other covenants and the international treaties, which is being violated by Indian authorities, BJP government in particular. So it definitely gives us the impression that it's part of a master plan, it's a part of a bigger strategy of that. And otherwise, why should it consistently be happening? Just 3 months ago, Nurpur and Jindal case had happened, and BJP government was just sleeping over it, unless the Gulf countries started retaliating. The social media was fully overwhelmed with boycotting the Indian products, and unless UAE had given a démarche to the ambassador, Indian ambassador in UAE, and one or two more countries. Once that happened, only after that they woke up after 10 days in the case of Nurpur and Jindal. So this time they knew that they would again have a diplomatic disaster if they do not take action. So now the Indian government, the BJP government, can hide
All
behind
right, and I understand that, but of
court
course
orders.
we also see the way that this action has been taken and what it amounts to. So of course that is also something that needs to be looked at. Dr. John, when we talk about how the BJP perhaps has a strategy of getting away with taking such insignificant actions, or talking about these things on a shallow level and trying to get away with the kind of response that such statements warrant from the BJP leadership, do you think that it is being successful in doing so, and that when this happens, the international community, particularly the Muslim sentiment around the world, is going to be satisfied with the ways these responses take place and the way that the Indian government takes action?
And Dr. Saab, I hope you can also speak to or explain for our audience the phenomenon where it seems that hate is mushrooming as a cottage industry in India right now. There seems to be patronage of the ruling party, otherwise this could not happen. What is behind this, sir?
It would seem that hate is not a cottage industry, it is the main industry, it would seem. Let me put the things in perspective. They're not doing it for fun. The twin objectives are, one, electoral, which means polarize the people so that they can reap electoral benefits in the elections which are coming quite soon, it would seem. Preparations are being made for the 2024 elections. Only a year and a half left, actually. The second is to divert attention from the crises in India. I use crises because there's more than one crisis. The economic crisis, deep-seated. Employment is an issue. In fact, hunger would soon be an issue if the rural countryside is not taken care of right away. So you have an economic crisis which builds on and aggravates the employment crisis, brings hunger to the household, and that's a major issue in elections also, how to divert attention from there. On the hate campaign, I think I would point out something which possibly foreigners, and I would include Pakistan in my term foreigners, despite a shared culture, don't seem to really understand. There is a ratcheting up. They realize that arresting Muslims impacts a small pocket, that otherwise passing a law in a state on love jihad, as they call it, impacts people, but on one state or one region or one language group. But when you attack the Prophet, and peace be upon him, you immediately light the fuse, an incendiary, and there's more bang for the buck, so to say, to put it crudely. And I think they've latched onto this, whoever is planning these things in the RSS, and the government should say, they've latched onto it, and therefore we see, while in Nupur Sharma's case, you could even excuse for a minute that she said it in the heat of a debate in response to a Muslim cleric. But the way this man, and I saw the terrible YouTube version of it, the way he's gloating over every sentence, every subclause. It is not something that has been said on the spur of the moment. Obviously, he's reading out a script, if not literally, from memory. And he dwells on it, he gloats on it, he licks his lips. That doesn't happen spontaneously. That calls for and requires and is in fact the result of planning, as you correctly said. And therefore, I would say...
Right, Dr. John, you talked about a particular issue of when we talk about the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and in any remarks made against him, and this being something that lights up the fuse. But when we take a look at the way that this response was given in terms of what Nupur Sharma stated, and I understand the difference and distinction that you're making, but at the end of the day, that still happened, and India still got away with it, and there hasn't been much consequence. And this again happened, and of course the arrest was done and then he was released, and we still really don't see any sort of international action or activation that such a remark should have perhaps warranted, according to how you think this is being seen or being felt by the Muslim community.
I quite get what you're saying, and let me here make a distinction. It's not India that is getting away. It's the government of India and the ruling party. And I would like to make a distinction because Rahul Gandhi, most of the opposition, the left parties, in fact, who are godless, have all immediately condemned it, as they have consistently condemned this RSS thing, because it's a threat to the idea of India. It is a threat, really. Now, why is the West particularly, why are even the Arabic states not as severe as they could be possibly, is something that we need to worry about, because it would mean that the government of India, the ruling party, would get away with it as long as it presents to the West its image of one level of containment, party to the big game on China and Russia. and partly as a big market of armament, of everything else, and as an exporter of manpower. So it's these twin factors that make the government of India seem to get away. I don't think they're eventually getting away because this polarization that I spoke of is impacting us. It's impacting the people of India, it's impacting the idea of India. And that is a very worrisome thing to every Indian, to me, to Hindus, to Sikhs, to everybody else, barring the members of the RSS and the BJP.
Right. Dr. John, earlier you also mentioned something that this is happening because the reason is that there needs to be attention diverted away from the real crises that is going on within India. And I understand that, but when we talk about diverting attention away from that, well, who really is it for? For the people of India or for the international community as well? Because it seems that perhaps the international community and diverting their attention away from the crisis of India is not something quite potential or probable in terms of the way that the international community is looking at or seeing things as they are. And if that's not happening, then what really is taking away from the international community responding to things that they can pay attention to?
Dr. Jamil would be better able to answer that question. But for me, I would say, and I am a critic of Quad and a critic of many other things that this government of India is planning, which I think threaten peace in the region, threaten India itself in a big way, because it brings, it aggravates the animosity between India and China, for instance. I'm no friend of China. As an Indian, I can't be. But I would very much want all tensions to de-escalate. Quad doesn't in any way de-escalate any tension, either in the China Sea or in the Indian Ocean. And therefore, in my eyes, it is suspect. And that is the sort of thing that I'm saying. When America, Europe, NATO, all the other advisors don't take action, don't take notice, or seem to take only minor notice. Partly, of course, is that they're as guilty in Islamophobia as anybody else. But partly it is also because they are touching India with kid gloves.
Right, absolutely. Farrukh, when we take a look at, of course, this particular issue and the way that the international community is responding or has been responding in the past as well, there have been many reasons that have been cited, of course, economic ones and their own interests as well. There are many international declarations and laws and norms that Dr. Jamil earlier highlighted and pointed out in which we see that India is, of course, in clear violation. However, despite that, there is not the kind of response that we want to see. We did see some sort of a response coming in the last time we heard such a statement from Nupur Sharma against the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. But when we take a look at all else that is also going on in terms of what is going on in Kashmir and what is going on with regards to the Muslim population and other minorities within India, it seems that there are enough reasons already for the international community to respond. There is enough norms and legal issues already there that are in clear violation. So what really is the problem? Mani?
Right, Sana. I think one important thing, and I hope Dr. Saab will be able to speak to the international angle more, but one aspect about one flaw of international law is that most of it does not exist. Wherever it does, you don't have the implementation mechanism. For example, UN is a body, an important body, but it is more like a parliament, and it has a central executive which is more politicized and manipulated, right? Because of that, most powers that sit there have their own interest and they keep on skewing the priorities or implementation. That's why you might see a different standard for Ukraine, a different standard for Israel, or for that matter Palestine, and a very different set of values for India. India is, as you have pointed out, is loaded. It is a rich country full of offers or potentialities, so they keep on compromising. But I want to actually focus also on the domestic angle, right? Nupur Sharma was a case in point when a person who was educated, articulate, a person with international exposure, deliberately decides to go on television and actually say something which is awful. There was reaction. There was a journalist who actually took out the clip and made it viral because he posted it. He was also arrested and they actually made an example of that man as well. But what happens in BJP's political system or political culture, it is basically a race to the bottom. Once somebody who is literate, educated, actually does this, the lesser educated, the bottom feeders keep on repeating the same thing again and again. And this is what is happening with Raja Singh as well. If you remember, his introduction to Pakistani people was that when ISPR actually made a video of Pakistan Zindabad, he copied it and changed the lyrics, and he made it Hindustan Zindabad, and he sang it, right? With that kind of a person who is hardly educated, who is more a hunda or a street urchin, that kind of people, when they start doing it, eventually they rise to the top, and the educated lot actually is removed. Advani and Vajpayee were just plucked and removed, and then you have Modi. After Modi, other people are even less educated or informed. So this kind of vicious cycle will continue. Unfortunately, the biggest reason why this is happening is that India's seculars, I'm not talking about good people like Dr. John Dayal, I'm talking about major mainstream political parties like Congress, they have collapsed. They don't know what to do because they are collapsing. Nobody is standing up for those values. One example is the Supreme Court of India, the CJ, is a very, very educated and morally sound man. But he is going to retire within days, and he hasn't been able to clear 500 cases where clarification was needed on such matters. When liberals or moderates start throwing in the towel, then nobody can save the minorities.
Right, absolutely. And I'll talk more about this with John Dayal as well. But Dr. Jamil, when we talk about the issue of Islamophobia, this is not something that is restricted to just India. We have seen this happen in other parts of the world as well. We have seen this being dealt with different people around the world, different leaderships around the world as well. And there have been many efforts made against hate speech in general too. So when we talk about this particular issue, of course, Pakistan earlier also tried to lead this particular issue and talk about it, and we did have some sort of a success at the UN as well. But in terms of the way that the Muslim countries, particularly the OIC, need to get together in terms of an action or an agenda in the way that they will respond seems to be something that we still need to talk about or deal with, because perhaps the understanding itself, the way the responses are going to be taken, the way action is going to be taken against certain countries is still not set. So when we don't have a collective stance on how to even deal with this issue, how do you think that the Muslim population or the Muslim countries around the world will be able to respond to incidents of Islamophobia?
And Dr. Saab, since we are talking about Islamophobia, there are other kinds of phobias or hate crimes against other faiths as well. Will it not be prudent to actually expand the agenda and ask all the nations to include their faiths as well against hate, particularly a charter that can be developed for the sentiments of all minorities all over the world?
Absolutely. In fact, it's not only billions of Muslims. Wherever in India, there are other religious groups and community there, and then basically those communities are also being hurt. From time and again, they are being marginalized time and again because of majority rules, and because of the very strategy of the BJP government. And then once that is happening around, then of course the any minority group or any religious community, once they try and advocate their case, they definitely, it would be very prudent and very useful to include the cases of other religious communities who are being marginalized. And I just quoted few international laws, and if they join their heads together, wherever, in whatever society it's happening, if we raise their voice, definitely that would be heard. And now, if we talk about this Islamophobia, we have really done a lot of work. Our governments have done a lot of work, particularly in last about 3-4 years. But that was in the domain of public diplomacy. We have done hardly anything, rather nothing, so far as the legal domain is concerned, legal international domain is concerned, legal diplomacy is concerned. Just nothing, almost zero, right? And how it could have been done? We have a very, very powerful platform, and that platform is OIC. OIC could have taken it up as a block, and they could have called the meeting of the head of their states and head of the government under Article 10 of the OIC. And
Right.
if that would have been done, and they would have passed a resolution and gone to the
Right,
Security
Dr. Jamil,
Council,
I want to
Security
talk more
Council.
about this. When you say that there's a lot that can be done, but we need to join hands for that. Of course, that's a big prerequisite of something happening. And then when you talk about the OIC as a strong platform, is it due to them having the potential to do something, or do you think that in the past there has been action taken by the OIC because of which we can call it a strong platform? Because of course, with regards to Islamophobia and other measures that different Muslim countries face around the world, we haven't really seen a collective response from the OIC.
And Dr. Saab, since we are talking about OIC, for example, after Nupur Sharma's episode, we saw that UAE actually went ahead and signed an agreement of worth $2 billion for agriculture cultivation. There seems to be a disconnect between the political priorities of the Muslim countries and their economic agendas. Till the time the two actually don't work in tandem, do you think there will be some result?
No, in fact, that's basically boils down to one point, that what is the geopolitical agenda of these important countries who are the member of OIC. That's part number one and point number one. And then becomes the economic interest of these countries. I think the political agenda becomes more strong within the ambit of the international politics. Now, you just heard, Dr. Saab, that the containment of China policy and the positioning in terms of string of pearls and a string of alliance towards the US and its allies, and a string of pearls, China and its allies, and the way they are positioning and the way the agreements have already happened between India and the US and their allies, it is a demonstration of one thing, that the interest and how it connects with the Gulf countries, that Gulf countries are mostly aligned with the American policy. With these are the factual truth. We cannot really deny that. And then once it comes to the geopolitical scenario, they also, because I've been there in about 2-3 countries as ambassador and as the head of the United Nations, so I'm in a position to read the situation there and feel the pulse of the people there and the rulers there. So from that angle, they have their own interest. Yes.
Okay. Dr. John, when we take a look at, of course, this particular incident or any incident which requires the people of India, whether it be Muslims or any other community, to get justice regarding something that has been done, what exactly do you think is the potential avenue or the potential of justice being done that exists within India, considering that when we talk about hate speech or remarks made against the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him as well, of course, the BJP has its own stance, has its own ideology, which is not really in the favor of people who are going to be demanding justice in this regard. And then when we talk about the legal course of action of things as well, or the legal avenues that currently exist, what sort of a safety net or an option is there for the people within India, the Muslims within India, with regards to standing up and raising their voice against this particular incident, for example? Can there really be some sort of access given or some sort of a punishment as a legal option that exists?
After we have taken this answer, I'm going to have a question for Dr. Saab as well.
I have a vested interest in ensuring that hate finds its nemesis in the judicial system. And therefore, my worry is that currently the institutions have been weakened to an extent that in the short term, there doesn't seem to be much hope. The Chief Justice retires tomorrow, as a matter of fact, in another half an hour. Is his last day in office. The new Chief Justice, and I am of the minority because he has a very bad reputation, but I think because of his past, there is hope in Mr. Justice Lalit, UU Lalit, who is as being sworn in tomorrow or the day after. I would like to hope that the judiciary will wake up because they have the larger picture also with them. But more than that, I also pin some hope on the fact I see a small revival, a sliver of a revival in the political system. The Congress is planning a national march from the south to the north and similar marches across the states. The upheaval in the state of Bihar, the anger in Kerala, the anger in Hyderabad and Telangana, I see after 4 years, a shimmer of hope there. And therefore, I also see a desperation in Mr. Modi's actions. You'd also notice, any observer of the Indian scene will notice, that there seems to be a dissent in the cabinet. Mr. Gadkari's actions of late speak of a rebel. And I think all this collectively...
Gadkari was actually sidelined recently. They have restructured the party. Is it not true?
No. They will punish Gadkari. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the fact that Gadkari consistently for the past several months has been, let's say, pricking Mr. Modi in one way or the other, or pricking Mr. Modi's proteges in Maharashtra and elsewhere. So obviously he'll be sidelined, and Rajnath Singh has been sidelined, and so on and so forth. But if you take Bihar, if you take Telangana, if you take Kerala, if you take Gadkari himself, and the big march that Rahul Gandhi's party is planning, for which they've got moral support from almost all the rest of the opposition parties, who will not be joining it as parties, but are not opposing it, are not planning something diversionary tactics, are therefore allowing the supporters to be there with it. Collectively, if you look at it, there's a glimmer of hope.
All right.
Right.
Yes, Farrukh, you had a question?
Very quickly,
Yes.
Dr. Saab, I think we owe you an apology.
And we are in a position where we are clutching at every straw that we see floating by.
Right. Dr. Dayal, I think that we Muslims actually owe you an apology. Pakistan is a majority Muslim country. In India also, Muslims are the largest minority, and that's why perhaps numbers protect them. We never or hardly ever actually talk about the plight of Christian brothers and sisters in India, because it seems that they are on the receiving end also of Hindutva extremism. Could you also speak to that as well, sir?
No, I've always maintained in India, in my writing, etc., no Christian in India is safe if every Muslim is not safe in India. Because the attitude, the blood, these are teeth that have tasted blood. And we had a saying which we unearthed, Professor Shamsul Islam unearthed the document which said, Aaj Isai, Kal Kasai, Parso Isai, Tarso Kasai. These are two terms they use for Christians and Muslims. So I have I'm not living in a fool's paradise. I told you, I have a vested interest in the security and the safety of Muslims in India in a rule of law.
Absolutely, Dr. John Dayal. It's true when we talk about justice, of course, and we talk about people being safe, if there is even one person who's not safe, then it means that everyone else is also threatened. But thank you very much for joining us, Dr. John and Dr. Jameel, for being a part of the debate. We'll now move on to our next segment, which also focuses on the way things have been happening and going bad for the people within the Indian occupation forces power, and how they have dealt with the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, which are again, of course, they have been suffering for such a long time, despite the fact that there have been repeated measures taken against them. There have been numerous human rights violations, numerous violations of international laws, of UN Security Council resolutions, a change in demography of the Indian occupied territory. And then, of course, the actions that were taken back in 2019 in August. So, of course, all of this seems to add to the suffering of the people of Kashmir. Their resolve continues. Pakistan's moral, diplomatic and support, of course, goes on. And this is something that we have tried and spoken about at various platforms. Again, the similar issue of the international community not responding still exists, and that is a problem that, of course, we deal with this particular issue as well. Let me welcome in the show Mr. Altaf Hussain Mani, who's the senior editor at APHC, has joined us online. Thank you very much for joining us in the debate, sir. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Of course, there have been many reports in the past coming out and talking about what is going on in Kashmir. There needs to be many, many more, perhaps, in the way that we need the world to understand, and we need to document the way that things have been going on within Kashmir and what has been happening even now. But of course, out of the few, there have been some in the past, and now we have a briefing report on, particularly also on the issue of silencing of journalists, of human rights activists, and they're important figures because they need to be able to exist in terms of the international community understanding and getting to know what's going on, backed by facts and evidence. However, of course, the Indian occupation forces have shunned this, have tried to silence their voices, and of course that affects the people of Kashmir and their struggle. Mr. Altaf, when we talk about this particular issue and the way that we need the international community to see and understand what is going on, and if we don't have enough voices doing that, or if we see that the existing voices are also silenced, what other options do you think remain for the people of Kashmir, and what needs to be done about this?
I think, first of all, I will talk about this report which was released today. It's of very great importance for the people of Kashmir, for the victims of the human rights violation in Kashmir, because this report, though it's documented by a local organization, but in collaboration with an international law firm, that's Snow White. And this firm has already registered an FIR against the Indian officials like Indian Army Chief, Indian Home Minister, and others of their involvement in the occupied Kashmir and human rights violations, because this has set a precedence for the future. And we have seen in past also there is a jurisdiction that's called the international jurisdiction, where the perpetrators can be held accountable. And this is a lawfare statement which has been now drawn by this organization, and making a particular reference to the journalists and human rights defenders. You see, these journalists and human rights defenders were the people who reported this, and then the international community, and we saw the two reports from the Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner, and that became the reason they became the victims of these state terrorism. But what needs to be done? Why India has imprisoned Khurram Parvez? Why they have imprisoned now Ahsan Ontu and other journalists, and using and misusing the terrorist anti-terrorist laws against them? Is that they want to silence each and every voice in Kashmir, because after they abrogated Article 370 and 35, there was a complete internet ban and communication blockade in Kashmir. But even then we saw nearly 14 of the communications from the Human Rights Commissioner's office, from the special rapporteurs, the government of India, dealing with the different kinds of human rights violations. And this was Khurram Parvez, who was basically a link between United Nations human rights system and the people of, and the victims of people of Jammu and Kashmir. And likewise, these journalists who have been framed in different anti-terror laws, these were reporting for the international newspapers. What India wants to do, it wants to crack down all the voices in Kashmir. They want that no voice should come out. Whatever they want to do in Kashmir, they are free to do. Because of the no condemnation from the international governments, India feels free to enact all those actions which they want to do in Kashmir.
Right, absolutely. And I understand but I just want to also understand the kind of significance and importance that such investigative reports hold in terms of the Kashmir cause as well. Of course, you said it's in collaboration with the local body, and then of course is an international law firm also involved. But in terms of the way that this report is valued, is treated, or causes any sort of ripples in the way that the international community acts, or how it affects the way the Indian occupation forces act within the Indian illegally occupied territory, does that hold any value? What sort of a value do these reports hold?
You see, for the Indians, it doesn't value anything because they have not. They are so arrogant. They have refused to even to oblige to the international commitments, to the international reports of the Human Rights Commissioner's Office and other reports. But when it comes to this report, when it goes to the international human rights organizations, it goes to the different think tanks, and the people talk about it, people write about it. So responsible disseminate this report, to talk more about this report, so that it becomes international and people come to know about it. As we talk about that, most of the reports do come out, but unfortunately, these are not talked about in the media. The people don't get the right reflection of these reports because for us, for Kashmiris, there is no media. India has silenced each and every media. Now for us, there remains only one media, that is the Pakistani media or the social media. For the social media also in Kashmir, they have put the restrictions on that. Anybody who uses social media and reports any human rights violation or a post for that, he is being also silenced, he is being put behind the bars, and UAPA, the Unlawful Prevention Act, is being enacted against him. So Indians are trying to, but Kashmiris outside India, elsewhere in the world, they are using all those mediums in order to create more awareness at an international forum. So, the responsibility in this way lies on the international community also, but more importantly, the Pakistani media, especially we don't have
Absolutely,
that much of English
and this
media.
is Vanessa, this is what I wanted to actually ask you. I understand that there are these reports which are actually showcasing or building the case against India's activities in Kashmir. Then I'm sure that you're looking at the footage that is going on the screen as well. The kind of footage which is unwatchable because there has been so many atrocities. There is visual evidence as well. And we have been discussing this for quite some time, that it should be shown to the world. Where are we lacking, sir? I understand that India is rich. India keeps on using its influence and money to silence that. But even then, in an open society, there shouldn't be a difficulty in pushing this message across to the viewers, to the voters, so that understand the kind of evil deeds India is actually doing in Kashmir. Compared to this, when you talk about the Western media spin regarding Uyghurs, you see that there is hardly any evidence. There's actually no evidence, but they keep on harping about that. Yeah. We haven't seen Kashmir being projected in the same manner, despite having so much overwhelming evidence. Why is so? Why is it so?
You see, we know the fact about Uyghurs, why Uyghur problem is more projected in international press and elsewhere. But it's because that, the force behind that, the agencies behind that, the United States and Europe, all they want to malign China one way or the other way. They are doing it. So that's why that's how they are manipulating everything in the Western media. When it comes to the Kashmir, unfortunately, there's only one country, that's Pakistan, who supports this cause in left and separate, and who raises voice at each and every level. But at the same time, the Western media, to manage the Western media, to manage the different media channels in the world, also the responsibility is of the Pakistani media, I think. When Pakistani media will show, you see that the medium we are talking about is the only English medium in Pakistan, where
right, Vanessa, but we are not merely talking about the media itself. Hang on, Vanessa, even social media, and not even social media, yeah. There are other examples. Yeah. For example, off the top of my head, I can cite at least 6 or 7 books written in the Western press on Uyghurs, or for that matter, Tibet or other topics. But where are the books written on Kashmir? Most of the books that I've seen of late are being written by Indians, and they contain one-sided story. So why is it that there is such a strong Kashmiri diaspora, there is such a strong Pakistani diaspora, then there are Muslims in OIC? Why are we not writing books? Why are we not piling on all the evidence in a coherent manner?
Sir, it starts like that. I think.
So go ahead.
They are trying their little bit, whatever they can, to project this cause. But at the end of the day, we need to channelize all these things. And here comes the leadership at the top level to do it. Unfortunately, the leadership in occupied Kashmir, which is the top leadership of this moment, they have never been allowed to go around the world to convince our people to have a single platform and to do this and that. But on the other hand, we rely morely on the Pakistani media, Pakistani political leadership, Pakistani print media, and other things in order to create this type of atmosphere at international level. But when it comes to Pakistan, for the last few years, we have seen the political turmoil in Pakistan, and Pakistani media is discussing the local discourse on each and every time, and there's nothing on Kashmir like that.
Right.
So and on the other hand, the magnitude, the social media the Indians use, the magnitude of social media Indians use, they cover it. If we tweet, if we all Pakistanis and Kashmiris will tweet, that will be, I think, 2.3 billion people. But when the Indians will tweet,
One is a very quick question. Whether I wanted to know that whether the message is not reaching the people of democracies, or it is reaching there and they are silent on purpose. Which one is it?
Sir, it is silent on purpose. I think mostly the power corridors in Western
absolutely.
world
Unfortunately,
know about
Anisa, we're out of time, but thank you so much for taking the time out and being a part of the show. And of course, Pakistan has continued to extend its support in the past as well, and including Pakistan media, we'll keep extending this support because, of course, we want to raise this issue, and we have been raising this issue at every possible platform. But of course, there needs to be a response that needs to come in as well, and we hope that we can see that sooner rather than later. That's all I have from the debate. See you tomorrow.